views expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sun Prairie Media Center staff, its video service providers, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Hello and welcome to Real Reviews. My name is Jamison Rabbit and I want to wish you all a very happy new year with our first episode of 2024. I am here all by my lonesome this week, no guest host, but I've brought, of course, a bunch of movies as well as something to talk about at the end of this episode. But I'm really excited. We've got some really fun movies, some really not so fun movies. So stick around to find out what's what. And I'm going to get it started right away with what we have on the marquee this week. And first up is the big movie from DC. It is a sequel of one of the most successful films in the struggling DC cinematic universe. It is Aquaman, The Lost Kingdom. We find Aquaman and wife Mira, now parents to a young baby boy. This is all introduced in a really hacky intro set to Born to Be Wild. We see his struggles as a new dad. Of course, Aquaman, played by Jason Momoa. He's a new dad, so we see his struggles, like getting peed in the mouth by the baby repeatedly. We also see that he's participating in underwater cage fights with big fish. And he's also dealing with bureaucratic headaches as the king of Atlantis. But elsewhere, we see there's several people in search of Atlantis, because there's always people in search of Atlantis. One scientist, Dr. Stephen Shin, played by Randall Park, is leading an expedition. He's concerned about global warming, but soon he's forced into the employ of our villain from the first film. That was Black Manta, played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. And Black Manta's on a mission to destroy Aquaman, to destroy Atlantis, and the world, if it comes down to it. He wants revenge for Aquaman killing his father and all these other things. And he's using the powers that he's harnessed from a broken trident staff that he finds and that he's able to put together, because there's always got to be a broken staff somewhere that imbues someone with powers. It's in everything. Black Manta's threats and attacks are intensified when he discovers these ancient ships underwater that require a very specific fuel that somehow releases greenhouse gases as well. So he's going to heat the planet up. He's going to purposely instigate more global warming as a way to ruin the fish man. And the only way Aquaman is able to stop this supercharged villain is to reunite with his brother, his younger brother, played by Patrick Wilson. And he's been imprisoned since the first film. Aquaman kind of led to him getting imprisoned in the first film. So the question of this movie is, can these brothers play nice and save Atlantis? Does this sound familiar in any way? It sounded really familiar to me as they were getting together and fighting and bickering along the way as they have to fight a common villain. This Aquaman movie is a dreadfully boring movie. The two brothers, one pulling the other one out of prison to help him to fight the bad guy. I mean, it's straight out of Marvel's Thor universe. And this movie dares to even make a Thor and Loki joke, which I thought was hilarious in the fact that they made me think about a better movie. It reminded me, this would be better if it was Thor and Loki. It would be entertaining at least. Don't make me imagine this movie in a better version. That's kind of dumb. And this movie made me cringe at how bad it is. And it felt like a first draft as far as script-wise. Like it's so bad. And the CGI felt like it wasn't finished in this movie. And of course, it all takes place underwater for the most part. A lot of CGI going on. It did not look great. Everything just looked bad. The story is so unfocused. It's a film also oddly seemed to be sponsored by Guinness, because there are multiple scenes of Aquaman and his father just sitting down to crack open some Guinnesses. Made me thirsty. Don't get me wrong, but it heavy product placement in this movie. And there's just so much lazy writing involved in here. Black Manta knows, as soon as he discovers these ancient ships, suddenly he knows what fuels them, how to run them, where to get this ancient fuel, all because Trident? I mean, I guess that's the answer. He found this broken trident that gives him all the knowledge. It's just full of CGI nonsense, this movie. And I thought it was especially funny in a week in which Zack Snyder released his own movie, the man who started the CGI nonsense in the DCU and eventually was relieved of his duties after failing pretty miserably with the last couple. It's funny that we would get one that really echoed those bad ones. And I think that the first Aquaman is one of my favorite movies in the DC universe. And so I was actually excited for this movie, but it truly felt like a bad video game where none of it really matters what's going on. And it's a film that seems like it's just trying to survive on the charisma of Jason Momoa. But unfortunately, he's balanced by the complete blandness of Patrick Wilson. And I found myself actively hating this film, and also kind of hating myself for sitting there and watching it. This is a tough watch, and it's kind of the death knell for DC. I mean, we know that DC is starting over with the new head of DC, and they're scrapping everyone. They've pretty much fired everyone and replacing everyone and rebooting everything. So even if this was really good, it leads to nowhere. It's a dead end. We are not getting anything more in this universe. We're starting over. So I wish the start over would have begun before this movie, and then I would have had to watch it. I end up giving Aquaman, The Lost Kingdom, what did I give that? 1.5 stars. That seems generous. It's not good. You don't need to rush out to see this in theaters. Another movie that we had on the marquee this week is the newest film from director George Clooney. It is The Boys in the Boat, a film based on the true story of the University of Washington, their junior varsity rowing team in the 1930s, the coach who put them together, and the men who became legends. We really focus on one of the rowers here, Joe Rance, who is played by Callum Turner, who we meet living in a Depression-era shanty town in Seattle, 1936. He's trying to go to school to be an engineer, but he needs money to stay in school. Well, it's the Depression. Easier said than done to get money. But he gets a tip that athletes on the rowing team at the University of Washington get a stipend and also a place to live. So he shows up along with several dozen other student athletes, none of whom have ever been on a crew before. And they meet Coach Ulbrichsen. Coach Al Ulbrichsen, played in here by Joel Edgerton. See him right there. A tough, no-nonsense coach who demands the absolute best from them and will only be selecting the 8 best athletes for his JV boat. We get several training sequences as men drop out and some excel. And of course, we get to our final 8, and no surprise, Joe is one of them. Be a boring story if we introduced him and he got cut. He's on the team, but making the team isn't enough because Coach Ulbrichsen is under pressure from the dean and the athletic director to beat Cal and to get his boat into the 1936 Berlin Olympics. This is a big deal. These are the Olympics that Adolf Hitler was running. And this JV team is tasked with finding their sink as one team and possibly pushing themselves into uncharted water as a bunch of kids who have never been here before. Joe also has a romantic angle with a fellow student named Joyce, who's played by Hadley Robinson, she's smitten with Joe, and we find out that he used to have a crush on her in 4th grade, and she hasn't forgotten about it. It's a really sweet angle between them. It's not too heavy-handed. It's played really right, and I never expected a rowing movie to be this intense and this dramatic. Joel Edgerton, he's great in everything he does. He brings the toughness, but the down-to-earth nature to this role that he brings to everything else. What makes him so likable? Callum Turner as Joe is up and down. I liked him. There's a turn that his character makes towards the end of the second act of this movie that I didn't find believable. But for the most part, he's very good. There's one of the guys, so we have 8 guys, 9 guys actually in the boat. There's 8 rowers plus the coxswain, who is kind of like the captain who keeps everyone on sync. You get to know, obviously, Joe more than others. There's some of the guys you barely get to know. They're just guys on the boat. But one of the guys who I really enjoyed is a guy named Don Hume, played by Jack Mulhern. He's the quiet but strong member of the boat. He kind of sits at the front, in the front seat. He was interesting. I kind of liked him. He at least had a really interesting turn in this film. Weird stuff though, like I don't know. Maybe everyone knows this about rowing. I never was on a crew. There's this contraption that the coxswains in the boat wear, where it's a bullhorn that is strapped to their face, and it's just kind of terrifying to look at. It's like something out of Saw, but it's how they communicate with everyone in the boat. That was kind of wild. There's moments in here that felt like they were the heavy hand of Hollywood license to manufacture drama that popped up here and there. But one of the things I really appreciated is that they didn't manufacture an antagonist. There wasn't a bad guy in this movie. It was just the story of these boys pushing themselves towards greatness. I guess if you're going to have a villain, there's Hitler at the end. History's greatest villain, but he's not the villain impeding these guys. And I like that there wasn't somebody trying to sabotage the boat or what have you. Spoilers, I guess, but and I love these true sports films that are set during the Depression era of the 1930s, whether it's Seabiscuit, boxing films like Cinderella Man, or Race about Jesse Owens, who, by the way, makes an appearance in here. Not the real Jesse Owens. A guy playing Jesse Owens, as of course they're at the 1936 Olympics, where of course he became a legend, winning 4 gold medals. He makes an appearance here. And I really appreciate this for George Clooney, who as a director has really struggled. He has had a run of less than spectacular films since he directed Ides of March way back in 2011. He's had films like The Tender Bar, Suburbicon, Midnight Sky, Monuments Men, some real misses and letdowns in there. And this one I thought was a nice return to greatness. This was a winner for me. And so The Boys in the Boat in theaters right now, I give a very strong 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's a nice, inspirational film. Who doesn't love a good inspirational sports film with fun montages? Looks good. So I recommend The Boys in the Boat for sure. Next, let's turn to the streaming spotlight, where I've got a bunch of different movies for you. The first of which is a French film called Anatomy of a Fall, written and directed by Justine Triet. Stars Sandra Hüller as Sandra Voiter. Sandra is an accomplished author. She is, at the beginning of the movie, is being interviewed in the chalet she and her husband and blind son share up in the French Alps. Just beautiful stuff. The interview is interrupted and cut short when her husband upstairs begins blaring music so loud that the conversation must come to an end. And the music choice is, it's a chef's kiss. It is a steel drum acoustic version of 50 Cent's PIMP. And it plays a lot in this movie, and I absolutely love it. I didn't know that existed, but I'm very happy I do now. Anyways, the interview is happening. It's cut short because this music is blaring. No one can have a conversation. And so it comes to an end. There's obvious tension in the house. But sometime later, the husband, Samuel, who is played by Samuel Thies, nice that everyone keeps their names, Samuel is found dead, lying in the snow at the bottom of the chalet. And the wife, Sandra, is suspected of murdering her husband. And the only witness to the events is their blind son, Daniel, who is played by Milo Machado Graner. And there's the investigation into what happened, with Sandra claiming that he must have committed suicide, while the suspicion is that she killed him. Daniel has his story, his version of what he heard, what he knows. And what follows is a lengthy trial that really restores my faith in great courtroom dramas. Daniel has his testimony, which is tested by the Advocate General, the prosecutor, man played by Antoine Reinhardt, who's really great. And the trial's a bit different from the style that we have here. It's a French trial, but the majority of it is spent questioning this author, Sandra, about her marriage and issues that she and Samuel may have had, and the Advocate General is just passive-aggressive enough that he really got under my skin. and he was supposed to. It worked really well. But the investigative process, the little things like the fact that she's German and she's living in her French husband's country of France, and did this maybe cause some issues between you guys? This comes up. There's a marriage story moment. The Adam Driver, Scarlett Johansson film. There's a great moment in there where there's the big fight between them. There's a marriage story moment in here that is really incredibly powerful. More so because we are just listening to it, much like Daniel would. We're listening to this argument happen, and it's pretty lengthy, and it's pretty great. It's a very cerebral courtroom drama, especially when they get into her writing and her genesis for her success as an author and how that's used against her. And I was really blown away by this. I love courtroom dramas. I'm a sucker for them, but I feel like we haven't gotten good ones in quite a while. Great ones are hard to find these days. And I really loved the young man who played Daniel, the son. He was very good. But the star here is Sandra Hüller, who plays this woman who has flaws, has insecurities, maybe a cold-blooded murderer, and she's absolutely compelling to watch. I really, really enjoyed her in this film. She did so much, oftentimes with so little, like just with her face, with reactions to testimony. And when she got to testify, man, she blew me away. The chalet is beautiful, set up in the French Alps. I mean, it's gorgeous scenery. And as recent courtroom thrillers go, this one doesn't fall into lazy traps that we've seen too often or go for really sensationalized drama. None of that. It just creates a compelling film that had me wanting to watch it again the next day. I really wanted to get back into this film because it really captured me. So this film, Anatomy of a Fall, I hedged on that 5-star. I ended up giving it the strongest of 4.5 stars. You might be able to talk me into 5-star. This was one of the better movies from 2023. It came out earlier in the year. We just got it over here streaming, so that's why I'm reviewing it now. But this is a film that came out in 2023, French film. Check it out. It's worth the time to rent this or however you can find it. The next film we have on our streaming spotlight is a documentary called 20 Days in Mariupol from director, this name is tough, Mstislav Chernov. It's a documentary about the early days of the most recent Russian invasion of Ukraine, but it's not told from the outside. Filmmaker Chernov is a Ukrainian journalist who goes towards the danger, towards the people who are under constant bombardment and threat of danger. And Chernov and his small team of journalists find themselves trapped in the besieged city of Mariupol as the Russians are making strong headway into Ukraine. This is in the early days of the war. There's confusion and rumors and fear that just course through the streets as Russian bombs drop from the sky, and soon Chernov and his team find themselves as the only reporters remaining in the city as mass evacuations take place ahead of the inevitable Russian invasion. And what they're able to capture, you see here, is really sobering, heartbreaking moments of human tragedy and needless loss of innocent lives. I mean, this film will get you choked up if you have any kind of a heart or a soul. It's hard to watch, but you can't stop watching it. It isn't a war doc in that you see battles taking place. It's not that. What you see is civilians being targeted by a Russian military force that's targeting homes and hospitals and schools, making the population feel as if nowhere is safe. And communication and power is being dismantled throughout the region. You know, classic true siege techniques to create more fear in the populace. And what we also see in this film, though, is heroes. Heroes everywhere. Heroes stepping up. Civilians, people, just regular people. Doctors and surgeons who risk their lives to save so many, even as bombs rain down around them. Delivering babies in a war zone. Trying to save children. Trying to save anyone who comes in. And the hospital is under constant bombardment in the neighborhood. And it's, wow. And there's just there's a tragic loss of children's lives in this movie, and there's a kind of a focus on that, and that's always tough. Innocent kids who are struck down just callously by these Russian forces. And the film is bookended. It opens and closes kind of with the same footage of Russian tanks moving into the city, aiming their cannons at civilian targets. Most terrifying when Chernov is filming out the window of the hospital that he is in as one tank is firing at an apartment complex. There's no military in this apartment complex. They're just firing at civilians, bombing homes, and this tank is firing at an apartment complex across the way when suddenly it turns its turrets and points the barrel right at the hospital. It's just it's frightening stuff because you know what's coming next. And you wonder where the horrific images that you see on the news and where they come from. It's from reporters like this, reporters like Chernov and his team who braved everything. And a documentary like this is just so important to give real information and to expose the misinformation campaign that the Russians have been propagating. And there's one of the things that Chernov and his team run into is that without any internet or power, that they are struggling to be able to upload all of this footage that they've shot, to get it out, to get it to the people that need to see it so that they don't just die with this footage and no one gets it. And that's one of the big things with them is what's the point of shooting all this and getting all this if we can't get it out to the people? That's a big chunk of this. But after you watch this, I highly recommend another film, film Klondike, which was one of my top films from last year, 2022, from 2022, that deals with the previous Russian invasion of Ukraine. Unfortunately, we have to clarify which one of these is. It's not a documentary, it's a scripted film, but it was one of my favorite films of 2022, Klondike. It's a pretty great partnership, a pretty tragic and sad partnership though. But 20 Days in Mariupol, I ended up giving an incredibly strong 4.5 stars. Sorry, I can't see. 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's one of the best documentaries I've seen this year, and I've watched quite a few of them, but this one really hit me. The last film I have for you for a streaming spotlight, I turned to Netflix for the newest film from director Zack Snyder. I promised he had a movie. I'm here with it. It's Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child on Fire. This film opens with Anthony Hopkins narrating some gobbledygook that in some other films would have been the opening scroll of the movie. But this film, there's whispers. He's talking about there's whispers of rebellion. And the big bad guy is sending his biggest bad guy to go crush the rebellion. And we meet early on the young would-be hero, here played by Sofia Boutella, but the young would-be hero working on the family farm on this poor planet, staring off at a not-so-distant world in the sunset, hoping to be there and not here, when the fearsome Atticus Noble arrives, dressed like a Nazi officer, seeking the planet's resources for the for the not empire. Sofia Boutella's character, Cora, and her friend Gunnar go off to seek someone to help them. So, of course, they go to a cantina where all the rough types and smugglers hang out. And after a fight breaks out in this cantina, Cora and Gunnar are able to hire Kai, who's played by Charlie Hunnam. He's a cocky rogue smuggler with a fast ship that's barely held together, who's going to take them to go find a general who can help them. Is any of this sounding familiar? Eventually, Cora basically forms her 7 samurai to take on Noble and his gang, and this movie has not one original bone in its body. This movie has no charm to it. And Zack Snyder isn't smart enough or skilled enough to steal slyly from other movies. He just steals from better movies. And it's Zack Snyder and his same lazy bag of tricks, characters that have no depth. Echoes of similar characters from other films. I mean, if you didn't catch on, what I was reading to you was basically the first 40 minutes of Star Wars. And that's what the beginning of this movie is. He doesn't create anything new. He just rips off other franchises. You'll see if you dare to watch this movie. I mean, you can pick out what movies inspired this movie and what scenes he just carbon copy with worse CGI, because Zack Snyder can't create depth in characters, so he uses things like super slow-mo to try and create drama. It's the same old bag of tricks that got him out of DC because his movies were terrible, and he utilizes horrible effects. If you've seen any of the trash that he did in the DC movies, you've seen all of his tricks. The silly dialogue, like I said, the super slow-mo in every battle scene is so redundant, and characters that make choices that make absolutely no sense. He's just one of our worst filmmakers who still dupes people into giving him money to make movies. And of course, the good version of this is always the director's cut. He's always one who's, when his movies tank, says, "Oh, but the director's cut's where all the good stuff is," right? He's so predictably lame. And even worse, this is part one. There's another one coming out, and I'm guessing in the next film, Korra probably loses a hand and Kai gets frozen in carbonite and someone reveals their parentage to someone else. You've seen it. It's just, it's not great. A robot voiced by Anthony Hopkins who's just so miscast in here. In short, I hated this movie, and I hate Zack Snyder as a filmmaker. I really don't recommend this movie in any form or fashion. I probably gave it too high of a score for what I'm giving it here. I gave it an incredibly weak 1 star. Maybe half a star seems more fitting. It might be one of the worst movies I've seen this year. And the year is very early. All right, let's move on to what we have coming soon, the weekend of January 12th. First film I have on the marquee is The Book of Clarence, directed by James Samuel. Struggling to find a better life, Clarence, played by Lakeith Stanfield, is captivated by the power of a rising Messiah and soon risks it all to carve a path to his own divine existence. This movie looks hilarious. Also stars Benedict Cumberbatch, James McAvoy, Tiana Taylor, David Oyelowo, and R.J. Cyler. Looks pretty funny. We also have Mean Girls. The legendary comedy is getting the musical treatment. This is based on the recent hit Broadway version of this film. Looking forward to this. We also have The Beekeeper. Jason Statham is out for revenge, and he's part of a clandestine organization known as The Beekeepers. This is from director David Ayer. Over on Netflix, we have a film called Lift, starring Gugu Mbatha Raw and Kevin Hart, as a master thief and her ex-boyfriend team up for one last big heist. Over on Prime Video, we have Role Play, starring Kaylee Cuoco as a PTA mom who has a secret life as an assassin. Oh, and her husband, David Oyelowo, finds out when they decide to role play. Lastly, we have Self-Reliance, written, directed, and starring Jake Johnson, about a man who participates in a life or death reality game show, but finds that he might have something to live for. Also stars Anna Kendrick and Andy Samberg. There you go. These are your movies coming out January 12th. Since I'm here all by my lonesome, I want to take one quick moment to just make an announcement about this show, about the future of the show. There's someone in the booth right now that's not happy with me. We recently celebrated our 500th episode. It was amazing. Last month we celebrated it. It was a lot of fun. It also got me thinking about where this show may be going in the future. And it's tough to say out loud, but I've decided to put this show on hiatus in the near future. So I just want to let all the viewers know that we have our 1000th episode coming up this spring, and I feel like that is a very fitting time to bid adieu to Real Reviews, and we'll see what happens after that. Who knows? But over the upcoming weeks and couple of months, I'm hoping to be able to roll in a bunch of familiar faces one last time and have some fun. But this is going to be awkward either way, but I just wanted to pass along information that that 1000th episode is probably going to be the last one for Real Reviews as we know it. So, yeah. Let's move on. Let's thank our sponsor who's been here for the entire time and who I appreciate so dearly, Marcus Theaters The Palace here in Sun Prairie. Thank you for sponsoring this program. Tom and the gang over there, thank you for being so wonderful to us here at Real Reviews. Next week, I'm very excited for this. I'm going to have Steve Sabaki back. We're going to be talking about a couple of movies, but more importantly, we're going to be talking about our worst movies of 2023. There's a lot of contenders. We're going to be running down our individual top 5 worst movies of the year. Oh, you know that means the following week we're going to be talking about our favorite movies of the year. So a lot of fun the next couple of weeks with Mr. Sabaki, so make sure to tune in for that. But until that time, I'm Jamison. Thanks for watching.